In the 1960s, ARPANET was invented. ARPANET is kind of like the internet that we all know and love and use every day. However, like anything that is good, it very rapidly became twisted and lost its charm and became the dark web. So let's talk about it. Hey, so while editing this video, I kind of realized that I'm so heavy into the history of the dark web that I never got a chance to actually get on it. So my next video will be me getting on the dark web, browsing it, seeing what it has to offer, and sharing it with you. So if you like that type of content, consider subscribing and liking this video. I'd appreciate it, but let's get back to the video. Believe it or not, the US government actually invented the dark web. They didn't know it at the time, but they did. So during the Cold War, the US government was progressing technologically very quickly, and they needed a way to share their information within the government, within the military, but anonymously and securely. That's how ARPANET was created. There was a need for anonymity. Anonymity. But unfortunately, things that are anonymous turn sour pretty quick, and that's exactly what happened shortly after. So in 1970, the first illegal transaction went through on the dark web, or on ARPANET. It was actually between Stanford students and MIT students. And what did they sell? Weed. So the first illegal transaction was actually marijuana, and that happened shortly after the creation of ARPANET, or the dark web. Because of these bold experiments by these researchers, the military decided that, hey, maybe we should split these two things in half. So there's now the MILNET and ARPANET. MILNET is actually still around today, and it's just a military network. ARPANET became the internet, and it's the internet that we use. However, shortly after the internet was split between MILNET and ARPANET, the dark side of the internet came out. In the 1990s, that's when piracy, illegal transactions, when the dark web and really the internet really formed and became what it is today. Ever hear of LimeWire or Napster? Yeah, that came from the 1990s when the internet was still being formed. At that point, everybody decided that, hey, this internet thing, it's here to stay, and there's a lot of opportunities that can be taken here, and that's exactly what happened. Illegal transactions became rampant all over the internet, and security was not a big concern at the time, so literally you just go and buy whatever you want and then send envelopes of cash or whatever. It could be tracked. It wasn't monitored the way that it is today. In 2002, Tor, or the Onion router, was invented. Now, Tor is basically a browser, which happens to be a gateway and a relay to make your information from your computer to a website completely anonymous by relaying the information. I'll get into that a little bit later. But 2002, that's when it was created. That's when it was introduced to the public. Now, up until then, internet traffic was honestly pretty plain text. The websites kind of sucked and they were boring, but at the same time, everything was, well, readily accessible because security was not a big concern. But with the introduction of Tor, this free spirit and this anonymous browsing was fully accessible now without any concern for being tracked, with the government looking at what you're doing. It was freedom. And with freedom comes a lot of illegal activities. Now, Tor really opened kind of the bottom of the iceberg for the internet. And I have a cool illustration kind of describing what the internet is in a nutshell. And all of us on YouTube and on Facebook, we're just chilling on top. There's a whole nother world on the other side of the internet. So, fun fact, the dark web is not all about buying drugs, hiring hitmen, and all that weird stuff. It's actually a great platform for those who are censored to share information about their country, about what's going on, share details, and communicate. There's a lot of countries like China and North Korea that are heavily censored on the internet. Now, before the invention of cryptocurrency, transactions on the internet were kind of strange. For the most part, they were just sending checks for payments. At some rare scenarios, sending envelopes of cash, and a little bit later on, PayPal and some websites with transactional permissions showed up, like PayPal. Now, when Bitcoin was invented, that was the deal breaker. There were some cryptocurrencies at the time, but they're irrelevant, not important. Bitcoin is king, like we know today. In 2009, Bitcoin was invented by some guy with a really cool name. Bitcoin was just this cryptocurrency that was inaccessible by most people, very confusing. How could this coin be worth anything? But on the dark web, it was worth billions. Only because this is the one true way to buy something completely anonymously without anybody knowing, and no one can track it. And that's when just the revolution of illegal transactions skyrocketed. So now that we have the dark web and we have Bitcoin, what can we buy with that? Well, actually everything. You can buy from drugs to ostriches to tigers and hitmen and honestly people on the internet. And that's the very sad and tragic part. And a lot of these things are sold on no other than the Silk Road. Now, the Silk Road was just this website, almost a Craigslist style website that was accessible to anybody on the Tor network. And all you had to do was pay with Bitcoin to get whatever you need, and it will just be shipped over to you. There's plenty of videos on the internet talking about ordering things from the dark web and how they come in and the whole process. Not gonna get into that. At a certain point, the government needed to get involved. In my opinion, it's good that they're involved, but at the same time, I'm not very down for censorship. But the reason why they got involved was simple. They can't tax these people, so they need to be shut down. I'm kidding. But the Silk Road was getting out of hand. There were millions and millions of transactions conducted, thousands of active users, and the government needed to put a stop to it because there was a lot of drugs, guns, and a whole bunch of legal things going on the streets from this one website. So in 2013, the Silk Road was shut down by the FBI. It's funny how the government built this platform only to shut it down decades later. Like I mentioned before, I'm not very big on censorship, especially government-involved censorship, because there's always a right-leaning or a left-leaning bias. But there's one thing that we can all agree on, and it is child pornography and child trafficking is bad. And that's exactly what the government said in 2015. So on the Onion router or on the Tor network, on the dark web, there was a website called Playpen. And it was basically a host of child pornography and sex trafficking and a whole bunch of terrible things. And the FBI, just like the Silk Road, put an end to it. I think we can all agree that that was a wonderful thing. That's when censorship is appropriate and when it should be done. The disgusting part about that is that about 150,000 users were active at the time when it was shut down. But unfortunately, the dark web is still plagued with these sickos who are posting pictures of children and a whole bunch of other sick stuff. So if you ever go on the dark web, be very cautious, because there's a lot of links and things behind these websites that could, in a way, incriminate you. For example, you might be thinking that you're opening a Silk Road type of website where it leads you instead to a child pornography site, and bam, that's kind of incriminating that you have possession. So my recommendation to you is do not go on the dark web. Stay away from it. For as long as the internet will be around, so will the dark web. The human nature craves anonymous living and anonymous conversations, and that's what the dark web is for. Now, is it good? Is it bad? I'm not the one to tell. But what I know is that for as long as the dark web exists, the government will go and start censoring things on it and shut down sites. Some are good, some might be bad, and that's just life. So if you want to see me go on the dark web, please hit like, subscribe, and maybe my next video will be exactly that. You can join me on that process. And as always, stay safe and stay secure. Take care.